Everything is fueled from me wanting to be a better person on earth.
It's time to do your part.
Welcome back, everybody. Do your part. Still on the road. I'm in Cathedral City here in the Coachella Valley, joined with Mr. John Freund, and he's a good buddy of mine. We're going to chat about a lot of stuff. Now, we've already had a chat once. We're here a second time, and it's just going to be that much better. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
I'm glad you're here.
Friday traffic was interesting.
Yeah.
On the 10th.
On the 13th?
Yes. Yeah, Friday the 13th. Well, it used to be a pagan holiday where they celebrated sex.
Interesting.
Yeah, so the church didn't like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure a lot of people will be celebrating today.
Yes.
All righty. So, as always, I ask my first guests, why are they here? Why did they choose to want to have these conversations with me or this specific convo? So, give us your answer.
Because you asked me.
Yeah. I like that.
I mean, that was really that easy.
That might be the shortest answer I've ever received. I'll take it, though.
Yeah.
Makes my job that much easier.
Yeah,
Yeah. So the reason I asked you here is because really more or less your past, right? Where you were raised, you coming to terms with some of your own underlying prejudice, you being so candid and talking about it in conversation, that's what prompted this and me asking you. So with that said, let's kind of move into a bit about your background, where you're from, and just paint us a picture a little bit.
Sure. I was born in Virginia. Grew up in just south of D.C., about half an hour, 40 minutes, in a mostly white neighborhood, as I said the other day, full of white privilege. My family has a long history here in the United States and in the South. I have ancestors who fought in the Civil War on the Confederate side. And I have Revolutionary War ancestors. So, we've been here a little while. And I was, like I said, I was born here, and then a year and a half old, we moved to Greece. My father worked for the CIA. Oh, wow. And we moved to Greece. We were there for 3 years, came back in 72, and my father retired in 74. Then my mom went to work for the CIA, and she worked there for years.
Just a family affair.
Yeah. Well,
wow.
She, when they were overseas, she would get a job like being a secretary, because that's what they called them back then, at whatever, local place. Actually, the first job that I remember her having, she worked for an architect. And she was their secretary or whatever. And then she went back to work for the CIA and eventually worked in the map library as a map librarian.
Interesting. I didn't even know those existed.
Yeah, well, it was funny. It used to be under a shopping mall in suburban Virginia. And it was like you walked by the movie theater, and then there were these two double doors with no sign, no nothing. You walked down the hallway and went through the door, and there was the guard.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you have siblings?
I have one sister who's older than I am. She's actually adopted, but she's 12 years older than I am.
Okay. A moment ago, you mentioned white privilege and where you were raised. Does your sister associate with white privilege as easily as you do, or the definition of, rather?
Probably not.
Gotcha.
I don't think we've even remotely discussed it.
Okay. And you and I have talked about white privilege before and how it's you're able to identify with it so easily. Why is that? And then we'll get back to your childhood, but why? Yeah. I'm curious.
Why do I accept it and accept that part and go, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, accept, acknowledge, understand, right? All of that.
Yeah, we talked the other day, and I think part of it was, really international travel. Being a young child growing up bilingual for the first, couple of years. And then, being exposed to other cultures that at that age, I don't think that I recognized, we're living in Greece and it's the cradle of democracy, and nothing like that.
Right.
But there, the little things that were different about Greece and then coming back to the United States, and it was a completely different cultural.
Yeah, you had a culture shock.
Yeah.
How could you not?
Yeah.
And you said that you speak some Greek, and that's kind of.
I did. I did. Back then, I was bilingual. Now,
gotcha.
Not so much. I got 2 or 3 words left.
Yeah. All right. So okay, so keep it coming.
All right. So, and then we talked a little bit about this before, but I I joined the National Guard when I was in high school, and
this is where a lot of the learning came in, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, I like the National Guard, not so much. I mean, like you go to the armory on the weekend and do whatever. But I was called to active duty for the first Gulf War. The day I was the capstone unit for my unit was the 18th Airborne Corps, and they were the first in. And so that, like, literally, I don't know, maybe an hour after Saddam Hussein rolled into Kuwait, they called me up and said, "Are you willing to go?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Good, because you're going." So, okay.
Well, they asked, and then you were going either way.
I was voluntold.
Did you? But you wanted? Something tells me you wanted to go.
Well, yeah. I mean, as a kid, my father was a World War II vet and a Korean War vet, and that's a big thing to live up to when you're a kid growing up in the suburbs and like around DC. Like that's. So there was always that got to prove myself to pops thing, and it really did. I mean, there was a. I mean, he and I fought like cats and dogs when I was in high school because I was doing all the wrong things. Really long hair and and he was Mr. Short Sleeve Pocket Protector.
CIA.
Yeah. And his pants were always too short, like that. But and so, like when I remember having gotten my security clearance, and we were waiting for my mom actually at the mall, waiting for her to get off of work or whatever, like we were going to go pick her up or something, and he told me a couple of stories about things he'd done in the CIA and things that, like I had no clue that was what he had done, or, those kind of things. And it was like a little rite of passage, like, oh, Dad is kind of accepting me and, letting me in on the secrets, And then after I got home, I was telling a story the other day to somebody else, on Veterans Day. After I got home from Saudi Arabia, my dad and we were sitting there watching TV one day, and we were watching some, war movie, Heartbreak Ridge, I think it was. About halfway through the movie, I just kind of stopped. We hadn't said anything to each other. We'd just been sitting there quietly watching the movie. And I looked over and said, "It's different now, isn't it?" And he just nodded, said, "Yep." And that was it.
And so what was different? Your relationship?
No, like watching a war movie after you've been to war,
I see,
is very different than watching it beforehand.
Tell us about the war experience for you.
Well, it was mind-bending, but not in the way that a lot of people are going to think. I went with a certain perception of reality, of what our country was, what it stood for. And while there, I had some moments of clarity. The first was I met a guy. We were downtown Dhahran, a couple hours of leave or whatever. The air war had started already. The ground war had not started, so we were still down south. And we're talking with these guys, and like for whatever reason, there was a little bubble in my head that kind of popped, and I suddenly realized, oh my God, these guys aren't so different. These human beings are just human beings like us, and what they want out of life is the same thing we want. They want.
You said a bubble popped. What was this? What bubble popped? What was the aha moment?
You when you've been in the service for a few years, like the first thing you do when you go to basic training and you start shooting and stuff, you're shooting at all these little pop-up targets, and it kind of dehumanizes it for you. And that's the whole goal of it. They are programming you to not think of that person as a person. They're thinking of, that's a target. So that when you kill that person, you don't conceive of it as taking a life. You think of it as, I got rid of the enemy. It was just a pop-up target. And, we got this propaganda that the Arabs were a lesser person, they weren't, I don't know, whatever. they had an evil way, you know, like they weren't they weren't a democracy, so therefore they were lesser, and you know, and oh, you know, they're just tribal, they don't matter, you know, that kind of thing. A very, very colonial thought process of America is always right, our way is the only way, and we should have influence in everything. And
do you agree with that now?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
Not even remotely. I don't know that I did then completely, but I, you know, like I said,
that's programming.
Yeah,
right?
it is. Yeah, programming. I mean, you know, when I was a kid, that you were taught that in school, and then you were, you know, like you join the army, they teach you that in the army, and that, you know, and then all of a sudden, like it hit me that this guy just wants to make it through life. He wants, you know, a little love, a little laughter. He wants his kids to grow up healthy and safe, and he wants them to have a little love and laughter, happiness, you know, however that happiness goes, you know. But he wants the same thing we all want, and that's literally, you know, we just want to get through life. I mean, you know.
When we spoke last, you told me that you wore two hats
Yes.
when you were in the field, if you will.
Yes.
One was photographer, the other one was a sharpshooter.
Yes.
So we'll get into that, because if you had this moment of clarity, but you still had to be a sharpshooter.
Yeah.
What?
So
I mean, were you having nightmares when you? I mean, let me go ahead. Let me let you.
Okay. How do I get there? I was.
Take your time.
Yeah, I know. I was on the national match high power rifle team for Virginia, for the Virginia National Guard. So I shot long range, like 600,000 yard shooting, right?
Jeez.
And that was how the commander of that unit met me, like, and was it kind of introduced to me. Oh, this guy, you know, he does these 1,000 yards matches and stuff. And I was good at it. Like so he said, hey, I could use somebody like you, a creative guy who can also shoot, you know. And he warned me, hey, when you join my unit, your capstone unit is 18th Airborne Corps, so there's a chance if anything ever happens, we will go to war. And I said, okay, well, you know, it's never going to happen, you know. But so when we got to Saudi Arabia, I worked for the 18th Airborne Corps Military Historian Unit.
Okay.
The Office of the Military Historian. And our job was to document everything that went on within the purview of 18th Airborne Corps.
Okay.
So we traveled all over to all the different units. We did all that kind of stuff. We interfaced with the French and with the English, and we, you know, so there was a little bit of cultural stuff going on there too. Like I was learning some new stuff. And then the commander, Doc, told me, here's your mission. You are to drive me wherever and make sure that I am safe. You are to take pictures when it is necessary, but the minute that anything becomes even remotely uncomfortable, I don't want to see another piece of, you know, I don't want to see another photograph on your film, because I want you to make sure that everyone in our unit, in our group, comes back in one piece. So then the combat camera crew guys get distributed out to the force, and we get some guys there, and he said, you are responsible for them, for their lives. So anytime we went anywhere, like I would take pictures until anybody even got like a, you know, if somebody gave us the hairy eyeball, like I was, you know, that was my job. I'm going to protect them. And so that was what I did. I mean, that was...
So tell me about, again, when you had this moment of clarity where you were like, these people are just as human as I am, but you still had to carry this gun around. Did you have moments where you said, okay, I don't want to do this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, where did the emotion tie into the job?
Well, it didn't really, because I mean, I recognized that I had to compartmentalize that, but it was, you know, scratching at the back of my brain, and there was a little boiling thought in the back going, But I still saw the Iraqis as the enemy, because that was still pounded at the front of the brain, you know.
So compartmentalizing is what got you through the rest of your tour.
Yeah.
So
but the real switch flip, the real screw up my head moment was after the ceasefire was called, we went up to, they called it a prisoner of war camp, but it was really just like a place in the desert where they had pushed berms together and put barbed wire up, and they separated the prisoners, enlisted and officers. And we went, and our mission was to go document this thing, right? Mm-hmm. And so we talked with the guards, and we talked with the commander, and then we went down, and we were, getting kind of shown the camp, and we talked with some of the POWs. And, we found that some of them were actually American citizens who had been snagged off the streets when they'd gone home to visit their parents. Wow. Or their family or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so, they were like, hey, man, it's good to talk. Oh, man, it's so good to hear an American voice and blah, 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 blah. Like it was a very weird situation. And the guys were just like, man, I just can't wait till this is over so I can go back to freaking States. And so when we got back and we were processing our photographs, that was when it hit me, because some of the other guys were like showing their, oh man, look at this really good picture of this guy. Oh man, he looked, I don't know. And I looked at all my photographs and I didn't have anything like that. Everything was groups of people, the whole thing. And it hit me. I mean, it was like someone smacked me with a brick. Mm-hmm. I realized that I didn't think of them as people. I just thought of them as targets. I just thought of them as the enemy. They were somebody to be killed.
Wow, so this was after the first moment of clarity. This really sealed the deal.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And that realization, like, literally hit me in a minute, you know? And I couldn't talk about it at the time. Mm-hmm. I probably couldn't talk about it for 6 months or a year.
Do you think other troops or guys in your, what would it be called?
I don't know. Occupation.
Okay, in their occupation. Do you think that your peers were feeling a lot of the same feelings? Did you see other men kind of processing emotions and trying to figure out what was going on?
Well, we sure as hell didn't talk about it. So if they were, I didn't hear about it.
So you didn't. Nobody's breaking down. Nobody's storming up.
No. I mean, but this was also the first Gulf War. It was short. It was quick. It was over. Mm-hmm. I know there was a lot of. Like there was some discussion among the combat camera crew guys and us, because when we went down to the they called it the Highway of Death, which was the main highway out of Kuwait City and into Iraq, where the Iraqi army had been fleeing and the Americans just destroyed them, just mm-hmm. devastated them, mm-hmm. and they were defenseless pretty much. And so we went down and took pictures of the aftermath. Mm. I mean, that's heavy, man. That's some heavy shit, to be a freaking 18-year-old kid seeing that and thinking these guys were just trying to get the hell out. Yeah. They were just trying to get home.
It's all heavy if you ask me.
Yeah, but the question is how many of them were thinking like that? Mm-hmm. They may not have been, mm-hmm. A lot of guys stayed in and, went another 15, 20 years, in the service. Yeah. Because they compartmentalized it away, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was a career. It's what they knew.
Yeah.
All right, let's come back home. Yep. Bring me back to, you said outside of D.C.
Yep.
Okay, so you came right home directly after?
I stayed in Fort Bragg for a couple of months because I was working on the brief to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and so it was extended for 90 days. Mm-hmm. So I stayed down at Fort Bragg alone. I didn't really know anybody. Mm-hmm. I knew a few guys that I just spent 6 months in the desert with, but I didn't really have connections there. Mm-hmm. And I had a rough homecoming. I got home on a Thursday, and I had to hitch a ride with somebody that night to get back up to Northern Virginia from Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I within a couple of hours of being home, I realized that the girlfriend that I had, was madly in love with had been messing around with one of my best friends. And
oh wow, it almost sounds a little cliche, right?
Yeah, it was. They make plenty of songs about it.
Yeah,
and we all march to them. Mm-hmm. Usually the guy's name is Jody, but so don't ask me why. I don't know who Jody was, but man, he got a bad rap.
Yeah. Okay.
So I rushed around, cleaned uniforms, did laundry, tried to figure out what the heck I was going to do with my brain while I figured out what was going on with her. And, literally within a couple hours, I figured it out. Mm-hmm. And so that was, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then Sunday night, I drove back down to Fort Bragg because I had to be back at work Monday morning. And so I worked that week and then came home that Friday, and my father, like, standing there at the door when I walked in, he said, "I don't know how to tell you this, but your grandfather died an hour ago." And my mom had been bugging me the weekend before to go see them because she hadn't told me that they had been very ill. And I was very close to my grandparents, very, very close. You know, my grandfather was the one who taught me how to shoot, taught me how to build stuff. And, you know, his was the basement workshop I hung out with when I was a little kid, sorting screws and, you know, that kind of silly stuff. So that was, you know, I was not in a good headspace for all of that crap going on. And then, you know, go down to Fort Bragg, spend the week by myself, you know, working, and then going and sitting at the barracks by myself, an empty barracks.
Ruminating.
Yeah. And so I was in a bad place for a while. And, you know, eventually figured out that this didn't have to be the definition of my life. So.
Okay.
So moved on.
And moved on, but still stayed in the area that you were raised in.
Yes.
But really just had kind of a change of an attitude.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So when we spoke last, you talked a bit about kind of your upbringing, and you said there were all kinds of different people that were raised within your neighborhood. And I should preface this with the fact that, you know, a lot of what we do with these conversations is hear about your backstory, but also to weave in some of, you know, again, you know, the stuff that we're all dealing with as far as prejudice and underlying prejudice. So I want you to talk about kind of the neighborhood that you grew up in and how you felt as a kid, and then how you felt in your mid-20s, and what, you know, because again, talk about that.
Okay. So I grew up in the 70s as a kid, and the neighborhood I grew up in was all white. Like, you know, we thought minorities were Catholics, you know, like that was, or maybe it was the minorities were the Protestants, because there were a bunch of Catholic families on my street. There were, you know, like in school, there were a couple of black kids, there were a couple of Koreans and a couple of Hispanics. That was about it.
Were they treated poorly?
No.
They weren't?
No.
Okay, good.
No. I mean, it really was like everybody was middle class, you know? And then, you know, as the 80s came in and you had a lot of the ERA and the quotas coming in and that kind of stuff, I think there was more tension came back in that area. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Further down south in Southern Virginia, it was different. You know,
Night and day.
Yeah. But in Northern Virginia, you know, like I said, everybody went to the same churches, and everybody, you know, same restaurants, and I never saw any overt racism, other than the way we talked about each other.
To each other's faces?
Yeah, to each other. No, not so much. I mean, like, you didn't call a black guy the N-word, but you would call your buddy the N-word. You know what I mean? Or as we talked about the other day, "Oh, dude, that's so gay." You know, "Oh, stop being so gay."
Yeah.
You know, it was always a negative connotation. But you didn't.
You were one of the lucky ones. You didn't deal with it. You didn't have to see a lot of racism growing up.
No, I didn't.
You didn't have a lot of pressure from outside sources telling you that.
I mean, other than being right across the river from D.C. Because there was always, like, you know, always the negative connotation of D.C. And,
which was what?
It's, you know,
Death capital.
Yeah, it was. I mean, all through high school, we would open up the paper every day and see what the death count was last night, because there, you know, it was the death capital. It was the murder capital of the world.
So there was a lot of the term black on black crime happening around that time.
Yes, there was. I mean, that was in the big, you know, crack epidemic days, and the Reagan, you know, Reagan war on drugs and the jump outs and all that stuff. And, you know, we were going down there scoring drugs. So, like, of course we were.
Not crack, were you really?
No, I didn't. Later.
Okay.
Later, and only for a very short period of time.
I never knew that about you.
I know. Yeah.
Wow. You know, people are listening and watching.
That's okay.
I'm not going to
I
edit
have
this
no
out.
secrets. I really don't.
You did have. You had actually. You've been recovering. You've been sober from alcohol.
I quit everything in '87.
Gotcha.
For 30 some odd years.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
I thought it was just alcohol. I didn't know there were other things involved.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever. We've all.
Alcohol was the least of the problems.
Wow.
Yeah.
You learn something new every day.
Yeah.
All right.
So, you know, so I had interaction. And the couple of jobs I had, like, between high school and college, because I took a year or so, 2 years off. I was in the National Guard, but I was also working as a landscaper. And I don't think we ever talked about it. Here's a perfect example of white privilege that I recognized right off.
Wow. At the time.
At the
right
time.
off. Okay,
at
go
the
ahead.
time. So here I am, 18 years old, no real job experience. I haven't had any leadership stuff. I haven't had any kind of management experience, nothing. So I go to work for a landscape company. I'm a white guy, so I get a job as a crew chief.
There you go.
Plain and simple,
period.
straight up, period. Yeah.
Period.
I'm
No experience.
no experience. I
Caucasian,
mean,
so-
I knew how to mow grass.
Yeah.
But because I was a white guy, I had a driver's license. I drove the truck, and the 6 Salvadorian refugees.
Got it.
Right, and half of them were illegal. And the big thing was,
Well, was that white privilege or just convenience on their
no,
part?
it was white privilege, dude. It was completely white.
I mean, I don't know
privilege.
if they could
Come
give one
on.
of the refugees the keys.
No, they couldn't.
Right.
They couldn't. And I'm
me
I'm
another
trying to
ex-
think
give me
back.
another example
I'm
of white
trying to think
privilege.
back. I think there was one black crew chief, and they had like 17 crews.
Give me another example of white privilege.
Well, I mean, the neighborhood I grew up in, the schools I went to, the health care I got. I had decent doctors when I was a child because my parents, had experienced white privilege before me because they grew up in segregated Arlington where they went to the white high school and the white elementary school and the white, you know what I mean? So they had experienced that stuff. They had taken the benefit of that. My father used his GI Bill to buy the house. Well, guess what? The black veterans from World War II did not get the GI Bill. So there you go.
That's a good. There's infinite, endless,
It
and
is.
still continuing.
It is. And right across the river in D.C., the schools were crap. They didn't, like anybody who had a good doctor just got lucky because some black guy went to a black college, got and came home because he cared about the kids in his neighborhood. It wasn't. I mean, you could swing a dead cat in my neighborhood and find a good doctor, but you couldn't do that in D.C.
Yeah. Affirmative action.
Yep. Yeah. We kind of chuckled about this.
Yeah.
We talked on this. Yeah.
There's my question
The
mark.
big note. Yeah. I am convinced that in the early 90s, I was a victim at times of reverse racism. I don't.
We'll touch on reverse racism,
Okay.
but go ahead. You finish.
Okay. So, I went to work in government contracting, and in the private sector, I was given opportunities because I was another white guy. And I'm convinced of it. I mean, it wasn't that I hadn't earned the position that I was in, but there were other guys who'd earned it too and didn't get it because they were not white. I mean, it wasn't like someone said, "Hey, you're a white guy, we're hiring you." It was just, like you were going and interviewing with a white guy. And my wife and I were talking the other day, and I have a good friend who's a roofer back in Virginia, and he does not recognize that he has the advantage of white privilege. And I keep trying to tell him, "Hey, well, here's an example of it. Here's an example." And he's, whatever. That's. I don't know. I don't know how to. I haven't found the right example, maybe. To tell him.
Yeah.
But one of the things he
He
was
shouldn't be
talking
able to come
about.
out. You shouldn't have to tell him.
Yeah. Well, that's.
You shouldn't have to.
It is.
I mean, you just open up a history book and just. I mean, it's
Shoulda in one hand and crap
it's
in the
ridiculous.
other, and see
again,
which one fills up faster.
Willful ignorance.
Yeah.
Talk about reverse racism. What makes you?
Hold on.
No.
Let me finish this one real quick.
No. I need to jump in here real quick,
All
and we
right.
can circle back. Okay.
Okay.
Reverse racism. Why do you use those words?
Well,
How do you reverse racism? We need to unpack that right now.
Man.
Because that doesn't
I know.
resonate with me.
When I
And
was
think
in- when I was
people
in-
who've experienced real racism, I think they resent that.
When I was in high school, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Probably, and I don't blame them.
Right. So that's
I mean,
why I
I'm
wanted
not
to
saying
unpack that
I'm not
now.
saying, oh my God, my life, I was so oppressed.
Right.
Don't.
Well, racism
because
is racism.
I still ended
it's
up
not reversed. There's no direction with racism. Racism is racism. If it's a black person to a white person or a white person to a black person.
But in the 80s and the 90s, I cannot tell you how many times I heard the exact phrase, "I'm black, I can't be racist."
That sounds like your buddy the roofer. That's just
It is.
That's just being ignorant.
It is. But that's how the thought of reverse racism, because they're black, they can't be racist.
But you didn't believe that when you heard it.
No, I didn't.
Right.
I didn't.
Okay. Pick up where you left off. I apologize for interrupting.
No. That's all right. So if this roofer goes to a house and it's a white family, and a black roofer shows up in the same clothes, in the same truck, has the same experience, like all of it, who are they going to hire? They're probably going to hire the white guy because they trust him more, because he's white. It's just, it's part of our tribal makeup in our brains, you know, like stays with like kind of thing. We protect, you know. But the screwy, here's the really screwy thing. Odds are, if it's a black family, they're going to hire the white roofer too, because our freaking racism is so insidious and so systemic.
I would argue that, but we only have so much time.
I mean, not always, but
most black people want to support black business, and we've always been encouraged of that. We have.
Yeah, yes, but I think even culturally, in America, we still will favor the white person, even if it's a black family. I'm convinced of it. Not always. Well, not always. You know, and I'm not saying
here's an example.
100% of the time the white people
here's
are going to pick the white roofer. Here's an example is Mexicans for Trump. That's an example. There's several examples, and you're right in that regard. Yeah. You know? Yeah.
People will. What's not in their best interest and what's not loyal to their...
And there was a time, I think, in the 80s, even maybe the 70s. No, you know what? It goes back further than that. Who am I kidding?
I'm sure it does. Let's talk about reparations.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. What do you want to talk about?
I heard you. I got some examples of how you feel about affirmative action. Now I want to hear how you feel about reparations and the idea of it. Only if you're comfortable. We can. I've got other things. We can.
You know me. I don't care about. I'll talk about anything.
Okay.
That. That's the concept is noble. The problem is the scope. Because like my family, going back to, before the Revolutionary War, never had a slave. Many of them, most of them grew up in North Carolina in the hills, farming rocks. Just, subsistence farming. They didn't have the money to have they were not sitting on the banks of the Swanee, watching their 50, slaves.
All right, let's move on to gun control.
But hold on. No,
we only have so much time, buddy.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Okay. So, but
I love the Swanee River, but I want to get to some real meat.
Okay, but hold on. The problem is, how do you calculate what's fair? How do you pay for that? Yeah, how do you?
Australia's done it. The Native Americans have been. That's a form of reparations here. In the United States.
What, giving them casinos as a form of reparation?
I don't think they give them casinos. I think they've given them land and offered them rules around casinos, rules that favor casinos on their land. But either way, I don't necessarily agree with it. But no, they also receive government money.
Not that much, man.
Well, regardless, I'm using those as examples that it has been practiced.
Yes, I'm not against reparations, but I haven't seen a scheme that really is doable because everybody is like, give them everything.
Remember, 40 acres and a mule. That's what it originally was.
You know what? All those red states.
You're gonna get me shut down.
I know. I'm just kidding. I don't believe that.
No, this is good. Now, again, the reason I have you here is because you've got a lot of perspective on a lot of things. So I want to try to get as much as we can. So let's move over to gun control a little bit. I had some friends of mine, in fact, family. Love you guys. I'm calling you out. Who encouraged me to get a gun, and I've just been still on the fence about the idea because I've never been a gun guy. What do you think about that?
Don't get a gun.
Okay, yeah.
That's
an easy answer, but
it is. But a gun is a tool. A gun is a tool. But unfortunately, some people take that tool and run with it like a maniac.
Yeah.
You know, I mentioned earlier today, even you and I were laughing about something, and I am a life member of the NRA. Mm-hmm. I don't like their politics. Mm-hmm. I don't like the organization anymore. If I could get a refund, I would do it. Mm-hmm. I joined because at the time I was shooting competitively, and I was trying to, you know, stay advanced in the competitive sport of shooting. I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe that all of the other amendments are worthless without the Second, because without that we cannot protect ourselves from the government, because that's what the Second Amendment is about.
Oh, so not from crazy people, from the government.
Yeah, from the
which
government.
A lot of people don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yes, a gun is a good tool to protect you from, you know, home invasion if you know how to use it, you know where it is, and it's, you know what I mean. There's
But isn't that the first thought that people have?
No.
It's like, oh, someone's going to come to my house and attack me. It's going to be some crazy people.
Well, these days, my big thing is, every now and then I take big cash payments, and I'm thinking I need to arm myself when I go to the bank. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, we live in Southern California, and sometimes things can get kind of crazy.
He's just kidding, you guys. Go ahead.
I love Southern California. I would not like to live anywhere else.
No, I meant you talking about you delivering cash packages. People are still. We're not, you know, CNN, but you know.
Yeah, it's not like, I'm not talking about millions. You know, I'm talking a few hundred, but you know, whatever. And it's not very often. I very rarely have cash. Thank you very much. So, you know, I believe that we should have the ability to protect ourselves from the government.
From the government. Every time you say that, that's crazy.
What's going on right now, buddy?
No, I get it. I
mean, Trump's talking about getting rid of the electorate.
Yeah.
You know, the electoral college, and putting his own little cronies in there. He's gotten rid of all the head of the freaking head of Department of Defense. He's getting, you know what I mean? He's putting his own little guys in there. Now, I don't honestly believe that there are enough. You know, I honestly believe, let me say this, I honestly believe that there are enough honest, good, moral, ethical men and women working in, you know, the armed services, the Secret Service, the police, that, you know, I don't expect, you know, that come January 20th, we're going to have a different president on it. You know, like, I'm not that paranoid. I'm not, you know.
Yeah.
But,
that's clear.
But this just shows me that had he gotten another 4 years, what would have happened? Mm-hmm. And if somebody followed on, you know, the next 4 or 8 years in the same vein, then I would be worried.
Yeah, and how bad could it have really?
I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's scary. It's scary.
It is scary. Talk a bit about, so when people look at you, they probably assume that you are right wing, or you would have voted for Trump. And I don't know how that kind of correlates in your day to day. It probably doesn't, right?
That probably makes people trust me more.
To open a dialogue and have these conversations.
No, that's not true.
Okay.
They all assume, like, people will assume that I am a Trump guy. Mm-hmm. That I'm some, you know, and
why aren't you?
Because I have a brain, because I think, and I am actually a libertarian. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a liberal. Mm-hmm. I am actually super fiscally conservative. I am a strict constitutionalist. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I also have a conscience, mm-hmm. and I'm a little bit socially liberal. Like I don't believe in the welfare state and the nanny state. Like we've come to rely on the federal government, I think, too much. Mm-hmm. I am a states' rights over federal rights guys. I'm an individual's rights over states' rights. You know, like all that stuff. And if I go down the Libertarian Party platform, I like tick off every box. Yep. You know?
That kind of sounds like how I view things a little bit.
So here's the funny thing about being a libertarian. People go, "Oh, libertarians, you guys are all nut jobs." But if you read the party platform, like, and then I'll tell them, "Hey, go take the test. Mm-hmm. Go to libertarian.org.
Oh, there's
take
a test.
The test.
For this.
Yeah, there's a test, and it'll tell you, are you a libertarian or aren't you? Mm-hmm. And it's like it doesn't like everybody becomes a libertarian. It's not that, except that almost everybody I have sent to take the test,
who thought they weren't.
Suddenly gets told, you know what, you think a lot like libertarians.
Yeah.
I mean, it's we've all seen
Just the
that
titles
meme.
alone divide us.
It is.
There's so many people in the gray area, which I
then you
think
get-
libertarians are. That's the gray area. That's the middle, right? You got
No,
super
I don't
left, super
think so.
right, and then you got these people
yeah,
in the
maybe,
middle.
maybe. I mean, I think that
People that believe in
libertarians.
capitalism, people that believe in taking care of each other, love thy neighbor, the golden rule.
Yes, yeah, we taled about that a lot. That was the one thing.
You want to talk about that right now?
We could. Yeah.
You go ahead.
Yeah, I mean,
because this is actually good timing because that will definitely be edited out.
No, leave it in. Come on, it's funny.
This was something that was very important to you when we first met and spoke.
Yeah.
And this is something that for me, it's like as kids, we learn so much. We learn about how to respect each other, how to treat each other. We learn manners. I've talked about this before, and the golden rule is part of that.
Yeah.
And at some point, somewhere, a lot of people lose that, but you have not. Talk about the importance
It
of
was the
golden
very first thing I remember learning in school.
rule. Wow. In school. I learned it from my
like
mom.
I went to Commonwealth Christian. What was it? Commonwealth Christian School.
Uh-huh.
And I went there for nursery school. And I remember seeing like the golden rule was up on the wall, and I remember us talking about it or doing whatever, and that whole concept of treating others as you would like to be treated.
Yeah.
And as we talked about before, if everyone just did that, well, guess what? We wouldn't have to have this conversation.
But where do people lose that?
Money, family, prejudice. They get it taught out of them, I think.
Why didn't you get it taught out of you?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I honestly, I couldn't tell you. I mean, when I was a kid, we went to Sunday school. Mm-hmm. I don't remember really learning it there. Mm-hmm. But, we the really funny thing, well, my mother was pretty liberal. But again, it was the 70s, women's rights. She was really, enjoying that part of life and the way things were going.
Well, she was definitely liberal if she was on the women's rights train at that era,
at
that time. Go ahead, sorry.
So, maybe I got some of it from there, but I don't know. I don't think she ever really,
Well, you live in California now, and you've been here for what, 3 years?
2.
2 years. You
Yeah, almost exactly 2 years.
And you've never lived here before.
No.
So you obviously, there had to have been some apprehensions before moving here, even though you did. You've visited here a gazillion times.
Yeah.
Tell me about your life now here and how you view home. And
well, I mean, it wasn't that I never looked at California like, oh, I'm going to be overrun by the liberals. I mean, that never really occurred to me. Mm-hmm. I mean, when we were kids, like California was the granola states full of fruits and nuts and flakes, you know, well, guess what it is. But I guess I'm one of the flakes.
I would say you're more of a nut.
Well, that could be too.
We know I'm the fruit.
I'm a nutty flake.
Yeah.
The one thing I was afraid of was taxes. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is I pay less here than I did in Virginia.
Wow.
Yeah.
As everybody's fleeing California.
Yeah, thinking, oh my God, it's so expensive here. I mean, like we were shocked, when it was time to register the car, and it was like $450 for my Jeep, and I was like, holy crap, man. Uh-huh. But I don't pay personal property tax. Back in Virginia, I paid $1,500 a year.
Wow.
So there's, that's a lot of money, man.
And you could go on and on.
Yeah, I could. I mean, the thing that California does do is they have sales and use taxes. So you pay more gas tax, but you don't pay personal property, which is what that was supposed to go to. And you pay, more tax on your tires, but it's because you're using them more, that kind of thing.
Why do you think people are fleeing California?
I hear it is about, I see a lot of this, it's the liberal snowflakes and Gary Newsom and his really terrible, whatever, the state government is going so liberal and crazy, and I don't know, I guess I don't see it. And what was funny was after I left Virginia, the governor there started doing all kinds of anti-gun stuff and all the stuff that everyone was like, that's what's going to happen when you go to California. So I always laugh and go, yeah, man, I pulled the ripcord at the right time, man. I got the heck out. So
Too funny.
And we moved here for family. We moved here for the grandchildren and the kids, and because we have 3 kids here in California and 7 grandkids, and that trumps all.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Yeah. No, yeah, good point. And at the end of the day, money doesn't really matter when it's all about family.
It doesn't.
All right, I love this. Let's talk a bit about protests and kind of how that has affected you, because you're just about an hour outside of LA.
Yeah.
Were you nervous? Were you happy? Were you accepting? How did you feel about all this?
About like all the Black Lives Matter stuff and all that? I was... So... Let me preface this a little bit.
Yeah,
Let me
please.
give you a little pre-story on this. The last couple of years that I spent in Virginia, I played music with a woman named Gaya Degbalola.
Ah, yes. This is a good time to talk about her.
It is. And her parents were very involved in the civil rights movement. She was very involved in the civil rights movement. She, sat in at lunch counters. She, stood off with the KKK. And then later moved to New York City, was involved with the Black Power movement, and then came back to Fredericksburg. And so, spending time with her and like doing little mini tours on the road, like we had a lot of time to talk about all of that stuff. And that was an incredible education. And it, it started opening my mind a little bit, I think. Because I did have, once again, another perspective, and I was open to it.
Yeah.
That's the one thing you've asked me a couple times, like, why you and not somebody else? And I guess I just remained open. I was lucky enough to retain that ability to see someone else's perspective and have an understanding of how someone else feels and that kind of thing. And it was important to me.
Yeah.
So maybe that golden rule thing. So when all the protests started going, I defended every one of them to all of my idiot friends who were like, "Oh, they're just disrupting. I'm like, man, stop saying they.
Yeah.
It's us. It's us.
Yeah.
Because, I try to see my fellow Americans as my fellow Americans. I don't think of you as my African American friend. I think of you as my friend Brian.
Thank you.
And you know what I mean? Like I've always, for some reason, that's kind of been the way I really have felt inside. I don't, even though I used the wrong words when I was a kid with my buddies and we laughed about it, blah, 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 I really didn't feel that way. I see human beings as human beings, and always kind of have. But I think, the things we talked about earlier, the international travel and, going to Saudi Arabia and that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
it really brought it more to the forefront of my brain. So when, I was appalled, disgusted, sick to my stomach over the whole Breonna Taylor thing, the George Floyd thing made me sick to watch.
Yeah.
Made me angry that some human being could treat another human being like that. And knowing deep down in my effing heart that the reason he didn't care about that guy, whether he meant to, whether it was overt, whatever, because he saw him as different.
Less than.
Yeah. And
Black, just say it.
But
but you're right.
But it's less than.
Right.
That's the black, yellow, brown. He would see all of them as less than.
Well, sure, he had an Asian guy who was right. One of the cops was an Asian dude.
Yeah.
One of the people that just stood there and watched.
Yeah.
It's nice to hear that you feel that way, because I couldn't watch the video. I still haven't watched it because it's just, again, it doesn't matter what gender, what color, what creature. It's all just hard to watch. And for those people that are able to co-sign it, or I had a buddy I talked to. He's like, well, he was on. They found meth in his blood, and he had put a gun to a woman's belly. Yeah,
doesn't matter. Like, you know what? He died over. And I don't even know if it's true.
The counterfeit bill or something?
Over the idea of a counterfeit bill. They didn't even have proof that it was a counterfeit bill at the time.
Right. While Epstein, even though he's dead now, but while these people who are, ruining children's lives are being tossed in jail, and this guy's being killed for a counterfeit bill.
But think about that. Is a man's life really worth $20 or not?
Of course not.
And I'll bet you the purchase was not $20. It was probably, $4 or $5.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that really worth any human being's life? No, fuck no.
Yeah.
Fuck no on every,
It's interesting because we live in a day and age where people can record this on film, but this is just another day in the life of a black man.
Yeah, I know.
We're almost out of time, so I want to talk a bit about always a message of hope, and that's something that you're always good for. Every time I see you, every time we hang out, you're always got this beautiful aura about you. You're a loving dude. It's true, and you definitely it's just part of who you are. So for some people that it's tough for them to have messages of hope or keep hope in their heart, what do you have to say to them?
The biggest thing is just do that golden rule thing, I'm a big believer in karma, and what you give out will come back. If you hate a lot, guess what? Hate's going to come back to you.
Yeah.
If you are,
reap what you sow.
if you love will come back. And it's been proven over and over again in my life.
Yeah.
So, I may not have the greatest life in the world. I may not be a millionaire. I may not, whatever. But I have 5 loving children. I have 7 loving grandchildren who are excited to see me
Every time.
Every time. Yeah. And that's all that really matters to me is that I'm happy. My family's happy. They get a little love. They get a little happiness. They live okay. They're healthy. They're safe. That's it.
So get some kids and get some grandkids.
Well, love somebody.
Yeah. Straight up.
Yeah.
That's why we're here.
Yeah. The idea that hate takes so much more energy than love is I don't know. That's so much for me. And that's all it takes. Treat others the way you want to be treated.
It's a nice way to close this, right?
Yeah, I like it.
You're a natural. All you need is love, everybody. As always, he kind of just said it for me, but you know what I always say, right? Love on yourselves, love on each other. We love you. A big thanks to you. Make sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, all social media platforms, and share these messages because it's important. We're doing important work, right?
Yeah.
All right, I appreciate you. And believe it or not, we are a little bit under 6 feet apart for COVID reasons. He was COVID tested last week as well as I. So we're trying to stay safe. We encourage you to do the same. And that's a wrap for us. We'll see you soon.